Imagine you bought a ticket to a movie. 10 minutes in, you realize it's terrible. The acting is painful, the plot makes no sense, and you're actively bored. But you stay. You stay for the full 2 hours. Why? Because you paid $12. And somehow, leaving would mean those $12 died for nothing. Congratulations! You just made a perfectly irrational decision, and your brain is very proud of you for it. This is the sunk cost fallacy, the deeply human tendency to keep going with something not because it's working, but because you've already put so much into it. And it doesn't just apply to bad movies. It explains why people stay in dead-end jobs for years, cling to failing relationships, and why governments have poured billions into projects everyone quietly knew were doomed. It might be the single most expensive thinking error our species makes. So let's talk about where it came from, what it does to your brain, and why a rat is better at avoiding it than you are. Here's the thing about a sunk cost. It's gone. Whether you stay in that movie theater or walk out, the $12 is spent. Either way. A rational person would only think about the future. Will the next 90 minutes of this movie bring me joy or suffering? But humans don't do that. We mentally attach ourselves to past investments like they're still alive, like they can still be rescued. In 1985, psychologists Hal Arks and Catherine Bloomer designed a clever experiment. They told participants about a military project to build a radar-blank airplane, a plane invisible to radar. The project was 90% complete and had already consumed millions of dollars. But a rival company had just released a better, cheaper version. The rational move? Cancel the project. But when participants were told about the millions already spent, 85% said to keep going. When the sunk cost information was removed, only 10% continued. Same project, same future, completely different decision, all because of a ghost. The ghost of money already spent. This isn't just a lab curiosity. It plays out at the highest levels of human decision-making. The Concorde supersonic jet is so famous for this that scientists literally named it the Concorde fallacy. The British and French governments poured billions into developing a plane that could cross the Atlantic at twice the speed of sound. It was a marvel of engineering and an economic catastrophe. British officials privately called it a commercial disaster that should never have been started. But neither government could bring themselves to pull the plug because they'd already spent so much. The Concorde flew for 27 years. It never once turned a profit. And then there's war. During the Vietnam War, American leaders faced mounting evidence that the conflict was unwinnable. But instead of withdrawing, they escalated. More troops, more money, more lives. The logic was always the same. We've sacrificed too much to stop now. The sunk cost fallacy didn't just waste money, it cost tens of thousands of lives. So why do we do this? Why can't we just walk away from a bad investment? Turns out, your brain is literally working against you. Researchers at Stanford discovered something remarkable in 2023. When you invest effort into obtaining something, money, time, sweat, emotional energy, your brain releases more dopamine when you finally get it. The more something costs you, the more your brain rewards you for having it. It's like a neurochemical receipt that says, this was expensive, therefore it must be valuable. The mechanism works like this. When you put in effort, nerve cells in a brain region called the striatum release acetylcholine, which in turn boosts dopamine production. Dopamine is the molecule of wanting, of craving, of this matters to me. So the harder you work for something, the more your brain chemically convinces you it was worth it, even when it wasn't. But it gets worse. Other brain regions pile on. The insula, the part of your brain that processes pain and disgust, lights up when you consider abandoning something you've invested in. Walking away from a sunk cost doesn't just feel like a bad decision. It feels physically unpleasant, like touching a hot stove. Meanwhile, your ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which normally helps you calculate future value rationally, gets suppressed. The emotional brain hijacks the rational one. This is why the sunk cost fallacy feels so convincing in the moment. It's not a logic problem, it's a feeling problem. And your brain has rigged the feelings. Here's where it gets humbling. Animals don't fall for this at all. When researchers studied rats, mice, and pigeons making cost-benefit decisions, they found something embarrassing for our species. Animals consistently abandon unprofitable ventures without a backward glance. A rat that's been pressing a lever for food and the food stops coming, it just walks away. No agonizing, no, but I've pressed this lever 400 times already. It evaluates the present, ignores the past, and moves on. Textbook rationality. And it's not just animals. Young children behave the same way. Studies across the human lifespan show that kids don't exhibit the sunk cost fallacy. They make decisions based purely on what's happening now. It's only as we grow into adolescence and adulthood that we start clinging to past investments. The very cognitive sophistication that makes us human, our ability to plan, to remember, to construct narratives, is what traps us. We tell ourselves stories. I've been in this career for 8 years. I can't switch now. We've been together so long, it would be a waste to break up. The story of the past investment becomes the chain that keeps us locked in. Kahneman and Tversky figured out part of why. Their prospect theory, published in 1979, showed that humans experience losses roughly twice as intensely as equivalent gains. Losing $50 feels about as bad as gaining $100 feels good. So abandoning a sunk cost doesn't feel like a neutral reset. It feels like a punch in the gut. And we'll do almost anything to avoid that punch, including making our future selves miserable. So is there an escape? Can you outsmart a brain that's chemically rigged to keep you stuck? Actually, yes, but it requires a specific mental trick. It's called zero-based thinking. Instead of asking, should I continue this? Ask a different question. Knowing what I know now, would I start this today? If the answer is no, if you wouldn't take that job, enter that relationship, or begin that project today with fresh eyes, then the only reason you're still in it is the sunk cost fallacy talking. The second trick is simpler. Focus ruthlessly on the future. Every minute you spend in that bad movie is a minute you could spend doing literally anything else. Economists call this opportunity cost, the value of the path not taken. The sunk cost fallacy hides opportunity costs. It makes you stare at what you've already spent instead of what you could still gain. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Right now, today, you are almost certainly trapped by a sunk cost somewhere in your life. A project you should cancel, a commitment you should end, a path you should leave. And the reason you haven't isn't because staying makes sense. It's because leaving feels like admitting that everything you put in was wasted. But it wasn't wasted. It was spent. There's a difference. Wasted means it was for nothing. Spent means it bought you information. The information that this isn't working. And the only real waste? That's staying in the bad movie. Because every minute you sit there, you're not just losing $12 anymore. You're losing something you can never get back. Your time. And unlike money, you don't get to earn more of it. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, but I've already put so much into this, remember, a rat would have left by now.